So, I want to talk a little bit about conversational selling. Conversational selling is exactly what it sounds like. It's a conversation. Um, a lot of sales guys make the mistake of thinking that they're more important than the prospect, and they don't listen to what the prospect has to say, and don't actually really have just a good ability to communicate with another individual. A good portion of what you're trying to do is actually hear what is going on with the prospect so that you can actually give them a solution. Um, One of the things I do is I tell a lot of stories when I'm talking to someone, and I give them some real life examples. But if you're going to go in and just say how your product is the best and you can do this and blah 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 blah, and you don't grant that that individual has their own opinions on things, and answer their questions and actually listen to what is killing them, which is the fact that they don't have sales, or they don't have enough sales, or they don't have enough customers coming in, you're not going to do well with it. You have to really, really, really be willing to get into an individual's head and understand what they're about. I talk about stories, and I'll give you just a really good example. This morning I was at church, and I had my smartphone, and somebody saw me playing around with an app called Umail, and Umail personalizes your response. So when somebody calls me, let's say Bob calls me, there's a female voice that says, "Hi, Bob. Laura's not available right now." And he thought that was really, really cool. And I was like, yeah, it's a pretty cool app. It makes for much more personalization, and it's free. And then there's another module that you add that would actually transcribe your messages in, and it's actually a huge time saver. I mean, it's a great thing for anybody with a smartphone to have. But then I went into telling him, I was like, I'm a bit of a tech geek. I love new technology. And I started to, and he says, "Oh, well, what do you got there?" And so I started showing him some location-based technologies. I showed him, that thing called Layer, which is in Module 9. And, I showed him, and I drew a little thing showing, showing him, Foursquare and so forth, and he started to get interested, and I didn't even know his name at this point, but then I said, he goes, "Well, what do you do?" And I said, "Oh, I have a marketing company. We're pretty good on mobile technology and local stuff, and we help a lot of local businesses." And he goes, "Oh, well, I'm a urologist, and we were using Reach Local, but they were costing a fortune." And I said, "Yeah, well, they do what they do is more pay-per-click, which is, paid." And then I drew out a little picture of Google, and I showed where the local results were versus this, that, and the other. And I said, "Yeah," I said, "you got to show up here and not here, or you need to show up in all these different places, but it really depends on what's what." I said, "We've had success with this guy and with that guy." I said, "I just like what I do." And he goes, "Well, we've had these problems," and he goes on and on. He goes, "Do you have a business card?" Now, interestingly enough, when he said, "Do you have a business card?" he is now trying to sell me on being that he could be my client. And then here's the kicker. I said, "You know what? I'm at church. I didn't bring a business card with me. I wasn't coming here to really pitch anything. I was coming here because I was going to church." And I said, "But you know what?" I said, "I'll write it down on a piece of paper." And he goes, "Yeah, we really need to talk because, I have somebody who's handling this stuff and I'm really not happy." And I said, "Well, we could take a look and see what's what." And whatnot. But interestingly enough, I told a story, or I'm telling you a story, and it's interesting. And I was listening to what the guy had to say, but I was just, it was about him, not us. And he was interested in, something that I was playing with on my phone, which was a really cool piece of technology. So just remember that you got to listen. It's about them. It's not about us. We're really cool. We know some cool stuff, but we have to actually really care about these guys and answer their questions, because otherwise you're not going to have a client for very long. So one of the other things that you want to look at is common points. What do you have in common? If you're dealing with someone who's got a business that's let's say cooking, and do you cook, or do they like golf or music, or do you have kids? Anytime you can find a common point between you and your prospect, you now have developed a friendship, and then the sales is not a sale. It's a conversation, and they make a decision based on liking or not liking you. And of course, you need to deliver what you promise, but nonetheless, that builds a huge amount of trust. So keep that in mind. It isn't about us, it's about them and what we can do for them. Um, the other thing I want to go into too is a little bit about, and I spelled it wrong, but nonetheless, I'm not going to redo the video just because my spelling is atrocious, is practicing. I had somebody on last week's coaching call who said, well, I don't really like talking to people much. Well, that's a problem. You've got to know how to talk to people. You've got to be willing to, or you need to hire somebody who can. So my big thing is that practice in front of the mirror. A friend, a spouse, brother, a sister, a dog, a cat, whatever. Practice the conversation. Get comfortable with the lingo. Get comfortable with what you can do. Get comfortable with any objection that could come up. The worst thing somebody will say is no, and that's fine. You just go on to the next person. In fact, when you do this listening and you tell the stories and you put your attention on caring about them, if they're nasty and ugly and yucky, you have just done a very smart thing by deciding not to take them on as a client. So this also is another way of ensuring that you're working with people you like and not just because somebody has money. And that's really important because otherwise you're going to just want to kill yourself at the end of everything, and you don't want that. So, which brings me to another point, which is when do you do a presentation, when don't you? If you're in a really good conversation, you want to show them a little bit, you can show them the PowerPoint and go over the basics and whatnot, but you don't always have to do that. You're going to have to use your gut, okay, and have a little bit of a barometer of if somebody's engaged or not. Now, here's an interesting thing. If somebody is sold, they're sold. Don't continue to sell them. You get them to sign, the agreement, and you get them started. So, welcome aboard. Let's get started. If you go past the point where you've already closed them and you keep trying to show them stuff, they'll get bored and they might very much back out. So you need to know when somebody is actually closed. So you'll ask them and says, if you're ready to start, we can, let me get you the paperwork or whatnot, and listen to what they have to say. So if after talking to them and showing them a few things, they're closed, you don't have to show them a presentation. If they want to know more and you want to give them more nitty gritty, then you do. But you don't have to do it if that's not the case. Now, if you're doing something where you're speaking in front of a group of people, presentation is a wonderful thing to have. And the other thing is you can do an online presentation if you can't be in front of somebody so they get some reality on what it is we do. And that's really the essence of the no close, because you really don't want to crush somebody on taking your service because it's always a problem. So I'm not saying always, but 9 out of 10 times, and I've had sales guys who were very, 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 very good at getting somebody's agreement, by putting their arm behind their back and forcing them in a certain way. Or, some guys will just sign, so you'll just shut up and get out. You don't want to do that because you're going to have a long-term relationship. You've got to talk to these guys every single month. They'll have your cell phone numbers. They'll know where you live. So you want to have a good relationship. So, but if you do this right and you use your takeaways, whereas, I don't take on everybody. I'm going to do a little research first. Let me get back to you. And really get the conversation going so that they're reaching more than you are, then they will ask you, how do I get started? You don't have to say, do you want to get started? They'll say, how do I get started? So that's really the viewpoint that you need to take is that we're very good at what we do. We don't have to have you as a client. We'd love to have you aboard, but we're not going to die without you. We've got a lot of other business that we could be doing. And although even that isn't maybe the way you're starting, that's the attitude you have to have, because if you have that attitude and you believe it to be true, it will be true, because the stuff that's in here is pretty darn unique and it really universally works. So there you have it. So the other thing that we wanted to go into is just pricing models. You're saying, well, what should I charge? Well, you know what? You could charge a whole bunch of different things depending on the market. And one of the reasons why we do the questionnaire is to get an idea of what somebody's budget is, because you don't want to overcharge, you don't want to undercharge. I would say that the minimum that I would charge for a setup, which is the place pages and Google, Bing, and Yahoo, is $300. But I can charge $1,000 for that if it's a more competitive market and it's a guy who's used to spending a lot. So you get an idea of what the budget is, and I don't want you to go where you're overcharging someone. I'm just saying is that your rates are going to be based on how hungry you are that week, how big the market you're dealing with is. There's a whole bunch of different things. So I could say, and that's why it says you make $500 today or $300 or $2,500. It depends on your market. It depends on your prospect. It depends on if you have social proof or not. I'd start out with lower pricing and then, move up from that. We also went, like I said, and if you know your budget, what somebody's budget is, you know that you're not going to undercharge or overcharge. Some guys are used to spending $5,000 a month, and you tell them you're going to charge 300. They're not going to go with you, not because they don't believe you can do it for 300. So we're being smart about this, and we know more than they do. And sometimes you get paid for knowing more than someone else, and sometimes the leveraging that is worth more than what the time is. So that is something you have to take a look at is your ranges. You can also charge by your experience. Now, I can charge a lot more because I have a huge amount of social proof and I've got a lot of successes and I can show this, that, and the other. You can do that in a month or two. That's simple enough. But you can charge by the experience, or in some cases, you can charge by the result. I know of one company that charges for every call that comes into a business, and they do tracking phone numbers. Unless you know your market, I think it's a little risky, but at the same time, one of the things that we do is we don't say to go on a long-term contract, month to month, because we do get a result. And so you don't have to lock somebody in for a year if you know you're going to do the job right. You're going to have to lock them in for a year and sue them if you don't get the job done. I mean, Yellow Pages, you've got to have a year contract, Well, if you did your job right, you don't need to have a year contract. You can go month to month. And here's the big thing is when you raise your rates. You raise your rates when you're really busy and you can hardly take on anyone else. Then you can actually, have an economy of scale and you can charge more. So, as you get results, as you grow, you can raise your rates. Now, I wouldn't necessarily change the rates for the people that you already have as customers. But new customers coming in, it's a minimum of this much a month. Now, there are also different levels of service. You have your setup, and like I said, start out at $300. Don't go underneath that. But you can charge much more than that. Okay, and then there's a mobile setup charge, and then you have your charges for your mobile ads. And I would really go more on a, this is what your monthly is, and then, your setup, and then your monthly is more of a maintenance. Like, for example, if you're maintaining a local, you're going to be adding citations, you're going to be adding reviews, you might change out the coupon, you might send out some ads, and I would have them I would charge them for the ads, whatever the dollar amount is, plus a management fee. Also setting up tags, setting up Google Boost. Foursquare and Google Places, those are all upsells. These are things that you can charge more for. So let's say you have a local setup, then you have, but you're going to do a mobile setup. So let's say you do a local setup, a mobile setup. The guy wants mobile ads, tags, Foursquare, and Google Places. Well, guess what? It's $300 for the first ones, $300 for the second. Because I like them, I'll charge them $300 for the other three, so that's $900, and your monthly would be $500. I don't know, I made that up as I went, but that's probably about right. So you get your gut knowing what's what. And so also know that beyond local and mobile, you can sell websites, pay-per-click, like Google AdWords. You can do SEO and social media management.